You as a viewing audience to hear from us as we dialogue about this conversation. And the anchor of our conversation today is surrounding an article that was published in the Atlanta Black Star, which is 5 things the black church can do to move forward. And so with all the conversation about the church, you know, you have persons that in the scuttlebutt arena want to find every preacher that's done everything wrong and just throw them out in the concourse. Matter of fact, I'll give you an example. Of course, you know, here in Memphis, we have this preacher who they have said has HIV and who has been spreading it. But one of the things I said on this show, first of all, he was not a pastor, he was an associate minister. And you and I know that has broad ramifications in the church. He could be somebody that said he had a call and just had indigestion, and now he's running and telling people he's a preacher. You know, it runs the gamut. All of us have been in that place of being an associate. Some are faithful. We obviously were faithful because we were elevated. Some just take it as a badge to wear to do whatever they do. So in that climate, we want to have some, I guess, candid conversation about the church. You know, both critique and both positive about the church. But as we start, let me frame the conversation this way. I want to make a statement and have you all kind of respond to it. Now, first of all, for those who are watching, we have various theological perspectives that are watching. There are some who will say there is no black church. There is one church. And how dare you segment the church? Well, what we are talking about when we talk about the black church is a sociological construct, because seriously, when you have worship service on Sundays, it's one of the most segregated hours in America. And it was created that way, not necessarily by us. When you go to the history, when you look at what happened with Richard Allen, when you look at the fact that, you know, black worshipers were relegated to the balcony, they weren't accepted in the church. And when Richard Allen had a group that were on their knees, and the usher said, y'all have to get up now. And he said, can't we at least finish the prayer? They said no and threw him out the church. Black church was born. Black church was born in the slave quarter. So, you know, there's a sociological reality of there being a black church. And that's what we speak of. The predominantly black denominations and all of the predominantly black local churches all across this land, which have serviced our people for decades, really for centuries. That's what we speak of. And that is the power behind the civil rights movement, behind almost every tangible movement of African Americans in this nation. So let me start there and kind of open this up. Give some critique as to what I said, and, you know, let's just talk about what the black church has meant to the black community. We need to start there.
Okay. Well, let me also say thank you for the opportunity to share with you again. It's always wonderful to be in your midst. But, you know, the black church has historically played a premier role in the cultivation of culture, in the advancement of the African American community. It has been the place where we've been educated, the place where we've been shaped and formed, the place where we've been encouraged. So in the larger American context, when we are discriminated against, or when we are you know, relegated into marginalized, you know, parts of our society, the black church is the one place where we've been accepted, where we've been welcomed, and then where we've been encouraged to be more than what, you know, society at large has, you know, demanded or even sort of labeled us to be. So, and while the church is transitioning and evolving into a more multicultural dynamic, if you will, there is still a need for the black church, because the black church understands the idiosyncrasies of black culture that other cultures may not necessarily understand well.
And just to add, first of all, thank you again for the invite, and just always honor and a privilege to be here on Black Thought. But to just add to what Janae just talked about is this whole notion, and the reason why people will say that there is no such thing as the black church, a lot of times we just have a problem with the adjective black. Or anything black. Just put that modifier in front. So the problem is not really the church. It's this whole notion about blackness. But there is a distinction. There is some distinctiveness. And it's okay to talk. I am a professor of African American Studies or Black Studies. So there is a distinctive feature or features about the black church and about blackness. And it's okay to talk about that. One of the things, just last night at our Bible study, we were talking about radical hospitality, and one of our deacons in training, Kim Travers, was doing an excellent job on explaining radical hospitality. But a lot of our members had an issue or a problem understanding radical hospitality because it sounded like Jesus and church, i.e. black church, to them. And everybody was talking about community, loving one another, being hospitable, sharing of food, all of those type of things that the black church had been known and still is known for. And so all of those type of other things that the black church has done about self-esteem and about lifting up, being, there in the midst, even, at its best. The black church has been there for the marginalized and the oppressed of all races, of all cultures. Remember, you were talking about this Richard Allen, and it's not that Richard Allen did not want to worship with white worshipers. White worshipers did not want to worship with Richard Allen.
That's right.
Black people have always, the door has always been open to white folk. It tickles me to see, to hear some white people say, well, if I come to your church, would I be accepted? That has never been a problem. It is historically, it's been the other way around. Exactly. It's been the problem. So this whole notion about the theology, the understanding, people are talking about what it means to be authentically Christian and things. At its best, the black church had practiced those things, and it's still a part of it, and we can draw from that well of experience anytime that we feel like it and anytime that is really needed, especially in crucial times such as these, when what it means to be Christian is to cut food stamps. What it means to be Christian is to shut down government. What it means to be Christian and to be God-centered and to honestly look in the camera and say, I am a God-fearing Christian, and said, I don't care about poor people and their needs. We need the theology of the black church. We need a critique of that blasphemous theology.
Amen. All right, Pastor Fisher, you have the floor.
Well, I don't even know if there's much that I could add to the strength and the breadth of perspective that has just been offered by my dear brother and sister. I would try to add this particular wrinkle, if I can, that I don't even think it's possible to verbalize and quantify the impact that the black church has had, not just on black culture, black life, and American society, but the world. I mean, if you think about the impact that King had in places like Crockett and all over the other side of the globe. I mean, he was nurtured and reared and developed and cultivated, not just as a black preacher, but in the black church, within the framework of the black church. So the beauty of the black church, Janae calls the black church moving into a multicultural realm. I think it's fair to suggest that the black church has always been multifaceted in such a way that it's kind of hard to define and quantify. And let me throw this wrinkle in too. The whole concept of black church as it stands in America doesn't seem to take into account that if we are talking about Christian churches, and the Christian churches were built on the back of the cornerstone, who is the Christ child, and the Christ child is a northeastern African brother, then the church, the Christian church, has always been a black church because it was founded by a black man, Jesus of Nazareth. So I think certain things that are relative to the contemporary experience have kind of sort of jaded the way in which we see the church at work in general, and this kind of sort of creates a ambiance, discord within the framework of American society where anything labeled black has seemed to be dismissive. But again, I don't think that we can talk about any legitimate and substantial progress, to put it into the terms of one of my colleagues, our friend and brother Christopher Davis. There is nothing, absolutely nothing, that has worked as well to uplift the spirit of humanity as the black church has. And what the black church has meant for black people cannot be quantified either. I think about Brother Dick Gregory, who said, when we could not find places in halls of academia and we could not find platforms in the political halls of Congress and the White House like we do now, the black church was the place where black politicians were being raised, and that the black church's bulletin was our New York Times. So again, we can't quantify it. We can highlight it, and I do want to celebrate it because I do think that the black church is worthy of celebration and critique. So I'm glad that we got a chance to celebrate it here up front.
If you ever had a doubt as to why we made sure Earle Fisher was a part of this, you just heard why. You know, he's going to warm it up because he started talking about Jesus is black. I almost started shouting in here. But that's a, now brother, in all fairness, I appreciate you doing that. That's a whole nother show there. Because see, there's somebody right now that their wig got twisted sideways when you said that. But it is the truth. All right, now we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get into the meat of this subject. We're going to go into those 5 things, but we started this way because we wanted to set the context. The black church is extremely important in the annals of black people. If people want to get some information to the black community at large, they go through the black church. Yep. NAACP, when they have something they want to do, call on the black church. This one, that one, calls on the black church. I know all of my colleagues here, you probably 2 or 3 times a week get somebody calling you because they have an agenda. And in order to push forward their agenda, they call you so they could get to the parishioners.
That's right.
Yep.
And the spheres of influence that you're over to push your agenda. Why you think around political times, politicians all of a sudden want to preach in the church? That's a whole, now I'm getting out of pocket now, but you think about that, all of this is tied to this important institution, but now we have a lot of things going on in our community, some of which have been going on for decades, but now they're coming to a head. How can the black church help to turn us around? So we're going to talk about that. Don't leave us. This is Black Thought, and I'm your host, Dr. Hutchinson.